Hello and welcome to a special interview of GeoStrata. Today we have with us Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad, who served as India's ambassador to the to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, to the Sultanate of Oman, and to the United Arab Emirates. In India, he is regarded as one of the most strategic experts on West Asian affairs. Ambassador, sir, how are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
It is so great to have you with us here today, sir. Uh, we will start from the person who is at the center of this conflict, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister. We know that he is fighting for his political survival. We'll start with your thoughts on Netanyahu and his legacy.
Well, you shouldn't be talking about his legacy just yet. He's still very much in place and has no intention of leaving for the foreseeable future. Uh, he has been an extraordinary phenomenon as far as Israeli politics is concerned. He has dominated Israeli politics for more than 20 years. He is regarded in Israel as an extraordinarily clever survivor, totally self absorbed, totally amoral. His survival and his success and his personal achievement, personal interest, they are paramount as far as he is concerned. He is also regarded as totally ruthless. As you know, that he has had to struggle to put together a majority in the Knesset over the last few elections. And indeed, there were short periods when he was out of office. But the last government that he put together is an extraordinary government. It brings in people who were regarded, even in Israel, as pariahs from the extreme right wing. So he brought those people into the government. Not only that, he gave them very senior positions. They are the finance minister and the national security minister. They are, if I may use the word, hardcore racist. They are extremely hostile to Arabs as a people. They are hostile to all forms of Palestinian aspirations. They are ruthless in terms of their agenda, which is to occupy all these occupied territories being Judaized. And that is the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem. So this is Netanyahu. Now, since saw upon him as a upon Israel has occurred from 7th October, you find that Netanyahu is under tremendous pressure. He had alienated himself from large sections of his own people because of the so-called judicial reforms that he was looking at in order to save his own position. He was willing to compromise all constitutional provisions in order to ensure that his interests would be protected because he is facing charges of nepotism, corruption, abuse of office, etc. Indeed, if he is not in position as prime minister, he is likely to be arrested and possibly even jailed for a long period. My own sense has been that he has a interest in projecting himself as a tough leader, as a leader who is ruthless, as a leader who will kill as many people as possible. But there is a subtext involved in all this, and that subtext is that the minute there is a truce, the minute there is a ceasefire, a real ceasefire, long-term ceasefire, there will be a significant sea change in the Israeli political order. I don't see Netanyahu figuring in that scenario. This is where we are. Therefore, I would personally believe that despite all the blandishments from Washington and all the visits from Blinken and all the pleas that are made for truth from various quarters, Netanyahu dare not support a peace process in West Asia.
Sir, you mentioned about his coalition and how he would not support a peace process because his coalition partners like Smotrich and Ben Gavir both have said that any peace deal that compromises on Israeli interests would mean that they would take away support from the government and it might risk Netanyahu's political career. With regards to the coalition that you said, there have been proofs, evidences proved at the International Court of Justice by various advocates that there was a deal between the coalition partners before December 2022. When they agreed that the status quo of Al-Aqsa has to be changed, illegal settlements have to be increased in the West Bank. Do you think this coalition government can survive its full mandate, given the protests at home and the international isolation that Israel is facing?
You see, you are referring to two different matters. There is the domestic politics of Israel pertaining to Netanyahu's criminal conduct and the judicial processes that he faces.
Yeah.
There is the political stroke military aspect relating to Palestinian aspirations.
Mm.
Those who oppose Netanyahu with regard to his criminal conduct and his attempts to reform the judicial processes are not necessarily supporters of Palestinian aspirations.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is banking on the fact that he will slowly get support from these people who are against him on the judicial issues, but are also against what the Palestinians are seeking, that is their own aspiration. It seems as of today, the number of people actually supporting a two-state solution in Israel or accommodating seriously any aspect of Palestinian aspiration is still a very small number. And therefore, Netanyahu is banking on that. He believes that the longer he can stretch the conflict, the more he kills as far as the people of Gaza are concerned. You see, he has made this proclamation that he is going to destroy Hamas.
Yeah.
Now, all of us know there is no way you can quote unquote destroy Hamas. Hamas is an integral part of the population of Gaza. And therefore, there is no way you can annihilate a popular movement or get rid of an entity that enjoys so much popular support. You can't go to Gaza and say so and so is from Hamas and so is a civilian. The Israelis, of course, are not bothered about this distinction, and they are quite happy to kill as many people as possible and get on with it, and to keep Netanyahu's coalition intact and to ensure that his political future remains in place.
Sir, you mentioned about the popular opinion within Israel. Uh, we have seen how the war cabinet minister Benny Gantz recently visited US and UK without approval from the prime minister's office, and Netanyahu himself said that Israel only has one prime minister. That shows rifts within the war cabinet, and the war cabinet was decided keeping National Security Minister Ben Gavir out, uh, which led him to declare an undeclared war on West Bank. Uh, with regards to this, I get reminded of Yair Lapid, who was former Prime Minister of Israel. He said that Israel has to do everything that it can to secure all the hostages back, and that the two-state solution is not dead; it's just delayed. So, is it a signal that is sending to the wider international community that if they facilitate Yair Lapid back into Tel Aviv, into the Prime Minister's office, he might as well work on the two-state solution?
I want to make one point clear to you. I am not aware of a single Israeli politician who exercises power and influence in his country who supports publicly the two-state solution. Whether it is Netanyahu or Smotrich or Ben Gvir or Benny Gantz or Yair Lapid or anyone else, on this there is clarity of thought. They are not going to allow, as of now, any entity that is non-Jewish. They may not absorb the occupied territories. That they cannot do, because the occupied territories, West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem, and the Arab communities who are Israeli citizens, the non-Jews outnumber the Jews in that space. Therefore, there is never going to be a question of absorbing. What you are likely to see is, I'm sorry to say, it is going to be exile enslavement, or execution. A three-point formula as far as the Palestinians are concerned. The tenor made for Benny Gantz sound like a much nicer guy and much more pleasant a person than Netanyahu. But let us be very, very clear. As of now, there is no politician in Israel who supports the two-state solution. No senior politician.
Sir, you mentioned about the demographic changes, the Jewish population and the Palestinian population. This brings me back to UNRWA, United Nations Relief Works and Agency. And the agency chief said that behind banning UNRWA's funding, the idea is a political ploy. The idea is to scrap off the right to return for Palestinians forever. So this will lead to the destruction of the idea of a two-state solution. This is what they said. So with regards to UNRWA, it has been a policy fluctuation from Washington's perspective. You know, Trump banned UNRWA, and then Biden administration came, revived it, and now again they've suspended their participation in funding the UNRWA. How far do you think these policy fluctuations in Washington affect their credibility in the region?
See, there are two separate aspects that you have mentioned, and I should address both of them. One is the standing of UNRWA, its role, and the criticisms that are being directed at it these days. And the second is US policy. Let me address UNRWA. This was set up by a UN General Assembly resolution, very unique entity, UN General Assembly resolution in 1949. And it was in response to the real concerns relating to 700,000 Palestinian refugees. Over a period of time, the refugees created by the 67 war are also recognized under this broad ambit, and they are being given a degree of support and a degree of assistance. International community, sections of the international community have been providing the funding for this entity, and I think it is the minimum source of survival as far as the Palestinians are concerned.
Yes.
Israel hates it. Israel hates it for one fundamental reason. The very existence of UNRWA, its reference to refugees, reminds Israelis that the international community recognizes that there are refugees that have been displaced and grossly abused and mistreated as a result of the creation of Israel and the subsequent conflicts that have occurred. That is why you will constantly hear the Israeli political leadership demanding that this be ended. The most serious, the most recent being that out of 30,000 employees of UNRWA, 12, according to the Israelis, are supporters of Hamas. 12. And as a result, some of the most diabolical Western countries' action has been to stop funding immediately without application of the mind. You are judged criminal. The person who is abusing you on a daily basis makes a charge against you, and all these Western nations line up without any inquiry, without any to stop the funding. People have pointed out it is very likely that in a small enclave like Gaza, where there are so many thousand people from with UNRWA, it's possible, just possible 12 are in. Penalize those 12. Identify them and penalize them, dismiss them. But Israel has used its political clout to shut down funding for this agency. This is because of its larger political position that refugees do not exist in their region. As you know, right at the beginning, when the Zionists first started coming into this territory, the so-called promised land, they said that this is a land without people for a people without land. The Jewish people had been thrown out of this so-called promised land by the Romans 2,000 years ago. But do recall that this land was not empty.
Yes.
And these Palestinians have lived there for the last 2,000 years. So let us not say that there were people, people, land without people for a people without land. Now, the other part is about the Americans. The one thing that I should insist for you and all your colleagues, never, never, never imagine that the United States has a foreign policy vision. It has a clarity of purpose, and it believes in anything that it ever espouses. Most of the time, from Washington, you hear moral platitudes from a country whose moral compass is usually awry and has no relation with any values that any country ever would have espoused. Therefore, please reject it out of hand. Now it comes to where you are today. One of the most pathetic displays of foreign policy posturing from has been going on in these last 4 months, 5 months. The president, they say, of the largest democracy, the leader of the free world, and what have you, this man, I have never seen a US president looking so pathetic. He is barely able to get his words out. Nobody gives him any attention that I can see, except he got a charge yesterday, gave very robust a State of the Union address. God bless him, and I wish him all the best. He's facing Donald Trump. So leave that aside. Look at the posturing. This man has called for ceasefire, but never followed it up. He has called for humanitarian assistance, but never followed it up. He has criticized Netanyahu, but never followed it up. He has criticized the hard right wing of the Israeli political order, but has never done anything about it.
Yes.
He has, therefore, you have to worry, you have to wonder. Electoral politics, one would have liked to believe, even in this amoral period, electoral politics should have had some semblance with some values or principles, or if not values and principles, possibly national interest. Today, the American posturing has alienated large sections of the American population, large sections of their support base in Europe, overwhelmingly the countries of the global south. And I would say to you very frankly, that if more and more countries today are identifying themselves as part of strategic autonomy postures, it is largely because the United States has lost all credibility whatsoever as your partner in terms of your security or in terms of guaranteeing your security.
So when we talk about diplomacy and restoring the balance of power in West Asia, we have seen how the Chinese have been able to, help the process of rapprochement between Saudi and Iran. And on the other hand, the Russians have been able to bring the Palestinian factions in Moscow to talk, or be it the re-inclusion of Syria into the Arab League. So the Chinese and the Russians are getting diplomacy done in the region. Whereas all the factors that you mentioned about America, based on that, how do you see the future of IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, and the Saudi-Israel normalization deal going ahead?
I want to start because all of you are young people and I have been in service for far too long. Let me remind you of two or three facts of life. India has been involved with, has had relations with West Asia for 5,000 years. Every part of West Asia, if there is archaeological activity, you will find remains of their links with India. From the period of the Sumerian civilization and the Egyptian civilization and our own Indus Valley civilization, there is evidence of Indians traveling to Mesopotamia and to Egypt, sharing with those people our knowledge with regard to mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and religion. We've also had popular people to people contacts, and our own Panchatantra has influenced the Arabian Nights over several centuries. This is the connection we've had. Also, this is reflected in the extraordinary warm feelings that everyone in West Asia has for India. This has been over several centuries. It is cultivated over several centuries. We've had Indian communities living in this region with their family members for more than 1,000 years. We have constantly nourished this relationship. We have given content to the relationship that the need according to the changing needs of the region. For several millennia, we have provided three items to the region: foodstuffs, textiles, and items of gracious living, jewelry. Three items. Even today, these three items constitute about 80% of our trade with the region.
And we do a lot of trade with them.
And they are a number three
One,
in the first
yes.
few, first three or four as of trade partners, the first of four. We have the number one community all across the Gulf. Regardless of communal identity or anything, it is India that has been cherished. And our
Yes.
political leaders consistently over the last 30 years have ensured that these relations are nurtured constantly. I want to make one point to you. In all this scenario, China has never figured. In 2011, I became an academic. I stopped being a diplomat, I became an academic. And I would participate in conferences dealing with the region. And my Chinese colleagues would also be there, academics would also be there, Japanese would be there, Korean, Arab, all of that. And I used to say, as I saw the situation, security situation deteriorating in the wake of the Arab Spring, I suggested an Asian initiative to promote peace and stability in the region. My Chinese friends told me, Ambassador, your country has been here for 5,000 years. We have been here for 5 years. We don't know the region. We don't know the culture. We don't know the religion. Please take the lead. We will support you. You go ahead. We will support you. I'm telling you this. I have written academic papers about this as well. But what I have been disappointed, it's a matter of anguish for me that this kind of role that I had envisaged, and a few friends around me envisaged for our role in West Asia. We thought so long as the Americans were dominant, they wouldn't allow anyone else to come.
Mm.
But I thought to myself that the Americans are in retreat. They want to pivot to the east. They are fatigued with the region. The region is fatigued with them. I'm talking about 2010, 2011, 2012, early in the
Arab
last
Spring.
decade. This is where the opportunity for us has come.
Mm.
And I wrote a lot. I badgered my people. I had retired, but I badgered my people with academic writing, with presentations, going to organizations and talking, etc. But what I have noticed, and then you have seen Mr. Modi went to the region and attached very high importance to the region, and it is reflected in the joint statement. But read the joint statement. What we are talking about all the time is economic cooperation and welfare of our community and bilateral military defense cooperation. They are looking for an Indian role in the region.
Mm. And
This
we
is
have
the
shied
difference.
away. We
That
have
is
shied
what they
away
wanted.
continuously.
That is what they had wanted. That India should, with all the extraordinary positive baggage that we should have been central to the political order in the region. We were close to Iran, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, and not close overnight, close over the last 5,000 years. So I felt that this was something that we should have done. And I initially welcomed Mr. Modi's overtures to the region, being fully confident that this would translate into a political action, political activity. That the difference is, ladies and gentlemen, India still favors a bilateral relationship. This made sense to me. When I was in service, the Americans never allowed anyone to have a security or strategic role.
Mm.
That is why it made sense that if I'm friendly with Iran, I'm friendly with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar, with UAE, and with Jordan and everybody, and with Israel, let me add.
Yes. We
But
have a good bond with the Israelis as well.
we, all this has remained bilateral.
Mm.
The Chinese approach, on the other hand, and this is what you must know, it is not a criticism. It is an expression of sorrow that we never looked at the region as a collective entity. To play a strategic role, you must look at the region as a collective entity. You must look at it as West Asia. What did the Chinese do? They had very strong bilateral relations like us, perhaps slightly more than us in terms of trade, etc. But what did they set up platforms of dialogue? China GCC dialogue, China Arab League dialogue, China Arab dialogue.
Hmm.
They built up these. So very sure. Then they did many other things, which I will share with you very quickly. They started developing their expertise relating to the region. From 2011 till I have been going to Cambridge every year for the last 12 years for our annual conference. Every college in the West has Chinese scholars learning Arabic and writing PhD thesis. The knowledge gap that my friends, Chinese friends, had told me in 2011, 2012, they have narrowed and bridged in the last 10 to 12 years. They've invested very heavily. In China, every university in China has a center for West Asian studies. Tsinghua University, Shanghai University, Shanghai International University, Fudan University, I know personally because my friend is there. So this is the difference. Now, China was a very reluctant role player where politics is concerned. And they were very keen India should take and do something. But they found that India was not there. And at the same time, things were getting out of control, particularly during the period of Donald Trump. You remember how
Yes.
close the region came to conflict. Donald Trump was absolute. I may have things to say about President Biden, but then I think of Donald Trump. And I mean, what do you do as a sane person? What do you do? Because this man carries chaos and anarchy with him as a full-time persona. I mean, that is his personality, chaos and anarchy. I would rather have a feeble president than a maniac. This guy murders people right and left. Aaj mood chala, shoot Qasem Soleimani.
Yes. Maximum
Pull down
pressure
that ship.
policy on
Shoot that
Iran.
ship. Do this. And he's a madman. I mean, I will tell you, he's seriously unstable. Now, this is where you found how close the region came to conflict.
Yes.
And it will kill the Americans to remember that it is Iran's restraint that saved the region. So, anyway, let us now move forward. China from 2020, they had a closed door meeting where their scholars, for the first time, I was not at that closed door meeting, it was in UAE. They articulated to a group of scholars that they are looking at joining into the politics of the region. They used the term quasi mediation diplomacy.
Ah,
I did not have access to that paper at that time.
interesting.
There was a paper written on this subject, but I did not know about it. When in on March 10, 2023, the agreement happened between Iran and Saudi Arabia, suddenly it struck me. Quasi mediation diplomacy is that China recognizes that problems between region and problems between countries have to be resolved by the countries concerned.
Mm.
But China places itself on the sidelines in order to provide its diplomatic intervention and clout wherever required.
Facilitate the process.
So there is a sea change in their approach. If in 2012 2011 they were saying we don't know the region, we don't know the language, we don't know the culture, we don't know. They have bridged that. Now very confidence. That is the basis on which they were able to bring these two countries together. And I believe this is some. Now, the background to this is very clear. The Chinese did what they had to do. What about the Saudis? The Donald Trump's period, though they were very close personally to Donald Trump, every day he lost credibility. He lost credibility as a security partner and a security guarantor. Therefore, from 2020, as Trump got out of the way, Saudi Arabia started asserting strategic autonomy and outreach to the neighboring countries based on engagement, diplomacy, and engagement. They reached out to Qatar, and in January 2021, that siege of Qatar was ended.
Lifted.
They reached out to Iran, and 4 or 5 rounds of dialogue with Iran took place.
In Oman, Iraq, across different capitals.
In Iraq, under the good offices of.
Yes.
They reached out to Turkey, and you know the rest. So this is where there is a coming together. China, this requires very astute diplomatic understanding. To understand, now we also did the same thing. It's not that we are less. We also understood that the Saudis are open to asserting strategic autonomy. But where we stopped short is that we continued to build substantial bilateral relations. We did not go to the next step of a strategic role in the region. This is the difference.
With regards to India and China, as you mentioned, it was a very comprehensive outlook. But I would like to mention one thing before we move ahead to the next question. India has not even called for an immediate ceasefire in the last statement that we produced, whereas China has called for giving permanent membership to Palestine, the state of Palestine at UN, and said that any delay in this might affect the two-state solution. As we move ahead, I would like you to focus just a little bit more on the messianic view of the Zionists in Israel, as you have mentioned a lot in your book, and we have been honored to read your book.
Yes.
Compilation.
I compliment you on going back. I want to tell you something since you have raised this subject. 9/11 happened. I'm sitting in the television, watching it on television in Dammam. In those days, I was ambassador in Saudi Arabia. I see the towers coming down. An extraordinary act of violence, indiscriminate violence. 3,000 people dead, women, children, ordinary people. A year earlier, the Israelis had cracked down on the Palestinians, and they had
Ariel Sharon visited
in the second Intifada. And then, as soon as 9/11 happened, the United States unleashed its firepower in Afghanistan, and then in 2003 in Iraq. Afghanistan, because Al-Qaeda was located there, made some sense, though of course they did carpet bombing, and in the first few days, they killed more than 100,000 people in Afghanistan, whom they called Taliban. Every Afghan became a Taliban, just like every Palestinian is a Hamas member.
Right.
But Iraq made no sense at all. But look at the violence the Americans unleashed upon Iraq. So I asked myself, ladies and gentlemen, I must explain this. Why is there so much unrestrained violence between these three so-called children of Abraham? The Jewish people, the Christian people, the Christian Americans, the Europeans have moved on, and they are Christian in terms of culture, not faith, and the Muslim people. This unrestrained violence, I had no clue, I had no understanding. I will tell, it's a very long story, but I will just word. I discovered the word Messianism. Messianism. And I anchored my book, which came out, Children of Abraham at War, the clash of Messianic military. Messianism is the belief that God is on your side, that he supports you, your agenda. And because he is on your side, he has given you the license for unrestrained violence upon your enemy, who is also his enemy. All three Abrahamic faiths are united with one belief, Messianism. But this Messianic view is directed at the children of Abraham. This is my conclusion, and I've argued this very strongly. I first had to study what is Messianic. I had no clue. We use the word messianic very loosely in literature. Oh, it sounds very messianic, or this is very messianic, or you would follow messianic. When I did the research, I found that there is a huge tradition relating to messianism in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In
mm,
fact, I want to share with you, I made a special trip to Jerusalem
mm,
to pick up the books relating to Jewish messianism because those books are not readily available here. I came back with 25 books.
wow,
I did not want any chapter of mine relating to Israel to quote non Israeli or non Jewish scholars
mm,
because they would all say that you are all against us anyway, you are all anti Semitic. I went to Israel, I spent 3 or 4 days there, I purchased 25, and they are there in front of me today. Those books are not those you see readily. These are books written by Israeli scholars who have discussed Israeli history, Israeli identity, what is the force, what is the meaning of Zionism, and what have the Zionists done in the region. Not all of them are anti-Israel. There are quite a few pro-Israel, but there is a lot of dissident right from some of the greatest scholars from Israel. We have to be proud of them that they have taken up the Palestinian cause very strongly. I mentioned to you, I don't know of any distinguished Israeli politician
yeah,
supporting the two-state solution, but there are some outstanding scholars and journalists in Israel, and indeed even rabbis. You have
mm,
to be proud of them. They take positions against the mainstream. They have the courage to come out in the open to speak online and in public lectures against what Israel has been doing over the last few years. So anyway, this is my response to you with regard to Messianism. I have discussed Messianism in considerable detail. It
in
is
your
not an
book.
easy book to read. I did not know how to write a book. Let me tell you straight away. And I had only read academic works. And I
But
thought this is the way to write. It's not an easy book to read. And sometimes I feel that I should revisit that project and write a simpler version. Maybe I will do it. But it is a book worth revisiting because there is a lot of hard information. It's very hard going.
mm,
It's written in 2010, 2011. Don't read it for contemporary development.
politics,
Those I have covered in my book, West Asia at
yes,
War.
war, yes.
The idea of Messianism, I don't think it has been discussed in such detail as it is in that. I believe. I would like to believe.
So we are waiting to read your new book if you write one. And as far as West Asian war is concerned, it lays out in detail what the messianic view is. One question regarding the Abraham Accords. You have quite often said that there can be Abraham Accords without a political solution on the Palestinian issue. No, that is not how an Abraham Accords can be successful. My question is, do you think the US was ever serious on delivering on the Oslo process? And how did it go wrong? As in,
You see, this is going back to history, going back to 30 years.
mm,
Much has happened since then.
mm,
Madrid and Oslo took place after the end of Cold.
yes,
You had George Bush Sr.,
and Clinton.
a very cerebral individual who made it his mission to pursue the peace process. And in Israel, you had Yitzhak Rabin, a very brave and bold man who recognized that you need to engage. This is a time to engage with Yasser Arafat.
Mm,
Each had demonized the other.
mm,
Yasser Arafat was called a terrorist and the PLO a terrorist organization, and this was referred to as a Zionist entity. What
after
Oslo
the first
delivered,
Intifada.
what Oslo delivered was mutual recognition.
Mm,
This whole business that the Palestinians are not partners for peace was done away
mm,
with. Do recall that Oslo was an interim arrangement.
mm,
It took certain first steps. It put aside the historical baggage of 48 and 67. A major attempt was made to go forward. The end of the Cold War had changed the global scenario,
mm,
and therefore they recognized it. All these countries recognized it. It was very controversial. But it was supposed to lead to first steps. And they were then supposed to go for the final status discussions, final status on three issues: the settlements,
Alexa.
this East Jerusalem, that is Al-Aqsa and East Jerusalem, and the refugees, three
Yes,
issues.
right to return. This
But
was what was discussed at the Camp
Rabin was
David as well.
assassinated
Yes.
by a hard right Jewish person.
Mm.
Yabin was assassinated. And it would not be wrong to say that with his assassination, there has been no politician of equal stature who could come forward bravely and sing the song of peace. Ehud Barak doesn't count.
Mm.
Ehud Barak, compared to Rabin, to my mind, is a lightweight. I'm not saying he's useless. He's a lightweight. And he did try desperately with Clinton at the Camp David too. But Camp David too was an inherently flawed initiative.
Mm.
Clinton and the Democrats had already lost the election.
Mm.
Ehud Barak was looking at an election that he would lose. The maximum that he could offer Yasser Arafat was not minimally acceptable. It is like,
Yes.
when we sit with the Pakistanis and you say that let the line of control be the international law. We don't say it, but
Yes.
suppose you said,
Mm.
they said what you are offering is not minimally acceptable. We want LOC plus.
Mm.
After all, we have done the conflict with you for 75 years. कुछ तो हमारे हाथ में डालो.
Yes.
Similarly, it happened with Camp David too, that Yasser Arafat, what they offered was not minimally accepted on all the three issues. And the people concerned did not have the political courage or the political standing to go forward.
Mm.
Do recall here the person who then stepped into the scenario,
Ariel Sharon.
Netanyahu.
Nathan.
Initially, Netanyahu, 3 years as prime minister, Netanyahu,
96 to
and then,
99.
of course, Ariel Sharon. And when Ariel Sharon got ill, it has been Netanyahu all the way,
Liquid.
with small gap, but Netanyahu. So Netanyahu has built his entire political career on the basis of supporting the right, the Likud party, the right. Now, having gone to the extreme right, because Likud on its own doesn't have the numbers and cannot put together a coalition that can rule the country, he has gone to the extreme right.
Right.
Therefore, the prospect for the foreseeable future, the prospect of a genuine peace process does not seem likely in coming years. I don't know. You see, I reflect, when you are by yourself, you reflect a lot. 30,000 people dead
It's
in a
humongous.
4 5 month period. The systematic humiliation of an entire people,
Mm.
the deprivation of their dignity, where these starving people go to for these aid trucks and they are shot and they killed in stampede. When you take away another human being's standing of dignity, we have seen this in front of our eyes. Can we therefore go back to business as usual? This is what I ask myself. I don't know. Wisdom would say, reason would say that you can't. You can't.
Yes, yes.
And yet, the Israelis have got away with so much in the
Yes.
past. And you know what Netanyahu is hoping for today? Trump आ जाएगा. ट्रम्प
Yes.
प्रेसिडेंट बन जाएगा. वो मुझे व्हाइट हाउस में बुलाएगा और मुझे सबसे बढ़िया बेडरूम देगा.
So,
This is
matlab,
this
uh,
is the low level when I am thinking high thoughts of long-term peace prospects and the return of dignity to a beleaguered people. This man's entire interest is to remain another day in office
yes,
and to
political
wait
survey.
for Donald Trump.
Yes.
Good luck to them. But I am terrified because when you are irrational and when you are maniacal, I've talked to a lot of people. You see, I also sometimes ask myself, are you being prejudiced? When you dislike someone, you can say that, look, am I being prejudiced? But a lot of people who know him, who have served in the United States, they say this guy is erratic, he is maniacal, totally unpredictable, and totally chaotic. Plus, now he's coming with a grievance.
Ah,
50% of American Republicans believe that he was robbed in 2020.
yes.
So he believes himself. So he's robbed in 2020. तो गुस्से के साथ भी आ रहा है.
Sir, now let's move to another interesting aspect.
So you had
Uh,
asked one small point. I apologize. I didn't
Sorry,
understand.
sir. Yes, yes,
Abraham Accord.
yes, sir.
I am going to say to you and your friends around you, I hate the word Abraham. Why? What does Prophet Abraham have to do with this?
Hmm.
This is an opportunistic arrangement between two countries. It has no strategic purpose or vision. It has no long term value whatsoever. It was Donald Trump who gave the word, gave this term Abraham Accord. I am saying to you with complete confidence, let the Israelis do a deal with the Palestinians, and that will be the Abraham Accord.
The real Abraham
What
Accord.
they are trying up to now is to do everything except address the Palestinian issue. I've told Israelis, like I'm talking to you, there have been Israelis sitting in some online discussion, and I say, your delegations go to UAE, your delegations go to Morocco, you go 1500 kilometers, 2000 kilometers, 3000 kilometers, 5000 kilometers. You won't go 5 kilometers. Just go from Jerusalem to Ramallah, 5 kilometers. That is where you belong, rather than roaming around all over the world trying to do deals which have no value, no purpose. You asked me about IMEC. Let me address that. IMEC. It has no future.
Yes.
It had no future when it was announced. It has no future. Now it came from the Americans.
Hmm.
Americans are looking desperately like losers.
Hmm.
They are excluded from most major developments in the region. वो बेल्ट एंड रोड के तो 10 साल हो गए.
Hmm.
अब अचानक आपको एक आइडिया सूझता है कि चलो भाई हमको भी कुछ करना चाहिए. 10 साल बाद 140 countries are part of Belt and Road Initiative,
Hmm.
and it has made a degree of progress.
Hmm.
Now here I am already India is already linked with the Middle East. It's not linked today. It's linked from 5,000 years. I don't need IMEC to link. Does the Gulf need the railway system? Yes. They have needed a railway system for 40 years. They don't have a railway system. Even now, they don't have a railway. When I was posted in Abu Dhabi, they talked about a railway system which will connect the whole Arabian Peninsula. To this day, there is no railway system. E- But absent the railway system, are we not trading through the Red Sea?
Hmm.
Every day, several 100,000 ships pass through the Red Sea. We are going through. Trade is going well. Why do I need to go to Haifa?
Yes.
I don't see any. This is one of the most idiotic initiatives that makes no sense geopolitically, economically, strategically, what have. This is a जबरदस्ती आप एक देश को लेके आ गए, which has no connection whatsoever with the rest of the region, the rest of the hinterland. When there is peace and when there is prosperity, Haifa will once again emerge or re-emerge as an important port in the Mediterranean. As of now, it is an Israeli port. We have so many other ports all across the East Mediterranean and all across the region as a whole. Why do I need to link my future in Delhi with Haifa when I am very happily doing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of trade both east and west through the Red Sea and through the through the Strait of Malacca?
Sir, you mentioned about Red Sea, and that is what I was leading to. In your book, you have mentioned about how Nasser's project of Pan-Arabism was defeated by Israel in 1967 war. They grabbed more land as well as it dealt a blow to Nasser's entire project vision. The second vision of standing up to Israel and the West has been Iran's axis of resistance. And as you mentioned, the Red Sea, we have seen what the Houthis have done. The deterrence of the West, the Americans, be it the British or be it the Europeans, the deterrents have failed in reining on the Houthis. Where do you think we are with the situation between axis of resistance and the West in West Asia?
Where are we? Sorry, the last part.
Where are we with the axis of resistance versus the West
Where
in
are
the
we?
region?
Are you asking about India?
Where is
Or
the
what is the
situation?
situation in the. Yeah,
What is the
yeah,
situation?
yeah. I saw your question. You see, Iran, when it came under sanctions from 1979,
Hmm.
and every year the sanctions have become more harsh. And there is a pervasive sense in Tehran that the West is actively hostile to us
Hmm.
and will never accommodate us in terms of our Islamic revolution. They will always try to effect to change and to harm our interests. The Iranian strategy in the face of sanctions is to shift the frontiers
Hmm.
rather than be vulnerable at their own border, which they saw happened in the case of the Iran-Iraq war. They built up surrogate players far away from their border, who would be the first line of defense.
Yes.
That is how Hezbollah came in.
Hmm.
That is how they attached themselves to Hamas.
Hmm.
And that is how you have the
Good.
more recently the emergence of the Houthis, and of course after 2003 the emergence of the Shia militia in Iraq.
Islamic
They
resistance.
constitute today the axis of resistance.
Hmm.
Okay. In the case of the Gaza war, this ax- this axis has become very robust, enough to put a degree pressure on Israel and the United States,
Hmm.
but not enough as to lead to a major region-wide conflict.
Hmm.
This is where we are. And Iran has demonstrated that it has the capacity for a full-scale assault on its enemies in case the enemy is thought of attacking the borders of it.
Hmm.
Were significant. Up to now, we have always focused on Hezbollah, but the surprise of the Gaza war are the Houthis. Houthis today have put extraordinary pressure on global shipping.
Yes.
You have seen this. None of us expected that.
No,
We
no.
always underestimated them. We used to think of them as a ragtag group of, and therefore, suddenly they have shown extraordinary capacity. And that is where we have to watch that. We should never underestimate these other groups. We think like the Saudis thought in 2015 that the Houthis would be finished in 3 months or 6 months.
Yeah.
Now 9 years have passed and they are still fighting.
They're talking. They're
Yeah,
talking with the Houthis.
they are talking, but the Houthis have not lost anything.
Yes.
They still control the major city. It is the Saudis that are desperate for a ceasefire today.
Yeah.
I don't blame them. This is what they need. Therefore, the axis of resistance is the statement coming from Iran that it has extraordinary military capacity across the region
Hmm.
and is able to defend its interests despite the sanctions of the last 40 or 50 years. This is the message that has been given, as far as I can see.
Sir, before we move on to our colleagues and their questions, before we open the floor, I would like to just question this question regards the truce efforts. We have seen Cairo, Doha, and Paris being engaged with various sides.
You see, this
Hamas.
is the problem. The key problem is this.
Hmm.
The Israelis want a temporary truce
Hmm.
so that the hostages are released. He's under domestic pressure on that.
Yes.
And then he can go back to the fighting and
Yes.
kill 30,000 more
Hmm.
Palestinians. So that he remains. Conflict has to continue.
Yes.
There is no scenario in which Netanyahu can accept a long-term truce. The Hamas are saying that you must accept a long-term truce, no fighting,
And withdraw.
must then
Withdraw from the strip.
withdraw from Gaza and let the Palestine Authority and us negotiate a settlement with regard to the government.
Hmm.
This is totally unacceptable to Netanyahu. I'm not saying Israel, I'm
Netanyahu.
saying to Netanyahu.
Yes.
Because the minute he accepts a long term truce, there will be political rumblings in Israel
Hmm.
and there will be no coalition left. Benny Gantz, and there may be either they will form an alternative government led by Benny Gantz and Yair Lapid. Benny Gantz's own status in the country has gone up, by the way.
Yes.
And there would be an alternative government, and these people would go back into opposition, and Netanyahu would go back to prison. So you have that outlook. That is why he is opposing the idea of a long term. truce. He wants to have a short-term truce, means have the cake and eat it too. Get all my hostages back and then pound these buggers once again all over so that as if there was no truce. Who would ever accept such a thing? Who would accept such a thing? It's not going to happen. Therefore, I know the Americans are saying all this. We will have to watch. We have to watch is, do the Americans have the capacity to demand something of Netanyahu that he is not willing to deliver, which is why they called Benny Gantz.
Yes.
They are discussing with Benny Gantz how this guy can be got rid of. Can you put together an alternative government and can you deliver a long term? This is what is being discussed, and he knows it. That is the reason why he's so angry.
Sir, let's move to the role of Jordan, Egypt, and Qatar with regards to bringing the truce, because that was originally what I wanted to go through. We have seen Jordan, Egypt, as well as Qatar play an active role, but still, a temporary truce has not been established that can bring relief into the enclave, Gaza Strip. Where do you think these countries play a role going forward to build a permanent truce at least? If Netanyahu stays in power or if he doesn't stay in power.
The reason why you mentioned these three countries at all is because these are the three countries in the region actually with contacts with Hamas.
Yes.
Actually, so Qatar has some sections of the Hamas leadership located in Doha. Egypt has a long-standing relationship with Gaza and with Hamas. In the past, has intervened from time to time. Jordan is, of course, an affected party because what our Israelis want is that the West Bank population should go to Jordan and the Gaza population should go to Egypt, and this whole region becomes all the Jewish. And we have a beautiful land called the State of Israel. This is therefore they are in the picture. They can only convey to the Americans and to the Israelis what they have heard. Now, what I just told you, which entity in the world is going to accept a temporary truce after giving up all the hostages? The last card you have in your hand, you
And
give that card up, and then you say, okay, come on now, boys, whack me once again and kill another 30,000 of us. Makes no sense to me. It makes no sense from any point of view. Therefore, I'm not sure what has to happen at this crucial stage is the fall of Netanyahu. Can Benny Gantz deliver on that? You see, Benny Gantz is a former soldier. He's a former chief of staff. He has not shown the political canvas. The political is not as wily as Netanyahu. You remember he had done a deal with Netanyahu that you be the president for the term, and the next half I will become
the first alternative prime minister.
For the next half, Netanyahu told him to bugger off, and he suffered that. He's been through that. He's more a soldier, but he's a nice man. He speaks properly compared to this aggressiveness that you hear from Netanyahu. But I'm not sure he's going anywhere. Now you are left with Yair Lapid. Yair Lapid is a little more, you could say, center left. He's totally opposed to Netanyahu. He did refuse to join the security committee. Benny Gantz, this is what is being discussed behind the scene. I have not been there, but if I was sitting here, I sense that if you want a truce and if you want these back, the other thing we want to do with us. So that is something doable. The Hamas they're talking to the Palestine Authority. They will give up their militant status and they will say that we are now a political entity. We'll see. These are matters of detail. Once you agree on the principle, many things start falling into place. We have some way to.
Sir, I would have talked West Asia with you for 24 hours if I had to. It was that great a conversation. Last question before I move to my colleagues because they are even waiting for a question. Last question is regarding what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow, Ramadan sets in, and big speculation is around what happens in the Al-Aqsa compound because Israelis have started putting in restrictions. They've also arrested people in the West Bank. Hamas has called on the Palestinians to march towards the Al-Aqsa and occupy it. Where do you think the situation in the conflict in region shifts tomorrow, given the
There will
importance
be
of
a lot of trouble. It's not something that has happened for the first time.
yes,
Al-Aqsa is a very sensitive matter. If you
yes,
remember the recent dissatisfaction,
April 2025.
Palestinians with Netanyahu's government was around Al-Aqsa. If
Yes,
you remember, the Ben Weir walked through Al-Aqsa, and
April.
like he owned it. He walked
Yes,
through the mosque when the prayers were going on. The second was the settlers in the arming of the settlers in the West Bank and
yes,
the aggressive posture of the settlers.
yes.
They never took cognizance of anything in Gaza. If you remember, Gaza was they assumed under control.
Yeah,
You see, this was where they got surprised. But the provocations were there.
yeah.
And if somebody says, oh, 7 October, Hamas attacked us, there's a whole history which goes back like 30, 40 years. Look at the atrocities the Israelis have perpetrated. Before the story begins on 7th October. You have to go through, even if you don't go to 7th October, just go to January last year.
Yes,
It's Morish and Ben Guer were expanding settlements, were beating up settlers, were killing people with the help. Even now, during
yes.
the Gaza war, 400 and odd settlers, 400 and odd Palestinians have been killed in the
Yes.
West Bank for no fault of theirs. They've
And
done
thousands arrested.
nothing.
Thousands have been arrested. Israeli cabinet
That
approved more
we don't.
expansions.
I can't tell you honestly. I think there will be a very massive show of force which will prevent the Palestinians from quote unquote occupying the mosque. I don't think that they will allow it. They will try their best to minimize casualties because the whole world is watching. But they have no compunction if a few are killed, so be it. It's not the end of the world. I don't attach importance to individual significant events, but I would still watch what Benny Gantz is doing and what are the political fortunes of Netanyahu.
Thank you, sir. Really good to talk to you. Now we'll move to the questions from on the floor. We'll first start with Anirban. Anirban, you can ask your question, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. It's been a very nice conversation so far, and it's also been very nice to hear you for around few minutes. Also, when we talk about West Asia, especially about the current conflict which is waging there, we usually talk about the regional partners as well as the regional players who also plays a very important role in this specific conflict. We usually come to the role of Egypt, which has played a long-term mediator between the two warring parties currently. So my question is actually focused on, is the role of Egypt as a long-term mediator between Hamas and Israel changing with the Egypt's condemnation of Israel operations in Gaza?
You see, I will have to say the following. Egypt will remain a significant role player in West Asian affairs. There is no comparison. No other country can match Egypt. Saudi Arabia has emerged as an important influence in the region. So has UAE. So has Qatar. So, yes, there are other players also. Also, Egypt is now looking more and more at its interests in Africa, particularly in the Horn of Africa. So Egypt is not just a West Asia related player. It is very much involved with the politics of the Red Sea, which affects it directly. They've lost revenues due to the recent Houthi crisis, and they have problems with Ethiopia. And you have the conflict in Sudan, the ongoing conflict in Sudan. They are players in all this. Uh, they will remain influential, but they will, I think, from time to time share the stage with certain other influential players, depending on the topic that is being discussed. But at no stage will they be wished away from the platform. There is no one else of that stature that can replace them in regional discussions.
Thank you, sir. We'll move to Digvijay. Digvijay, you may please ask your question.
Yeah, so good afternoon, sir. My question is regarding Iran. Basically, earlier in the conversation, you said that Iran's restraint has saved the region, right? So we also know that in the West Asia, only Israel possesses atomic weapons, right? So how is the West Asian balance of power going to change after Iran also gets its bomb?
Well, Iran has said and said repeatedly that it is not seeking a nuclear weapon. And even from various sources, it has come that they have made hardly any progress towards a nuclear weapon. It appears when we look back that they were seeking the capacity to master the technology with regard to weaponization rather than actually acquire a weapon. It's now wide open. Most of the information relating to Iran's nuclear program has come from Israel, it has a vested interest in terms of highlighting this and build a very large number of nuclear scientists as well. My answer to you is this: the issues that have created discord in the region have very little to do with nuclear weapons. They are due to issues that have remained unresolved over a very long time and in which nuclear issues do not figure. Let me go step by step. Iran is, from the Israeli perspective, Iran is the one country in West Asia that is a credible threat. Earlier were Syria and Iraq. Both have been emasculated and they no longer are credible threats. Turkey could be seen as a quote-unquote threat, but Turkey is an integral part of the Western alliance and so far has never shown any aggressive intentions as far as Israel is. As far as the rest of the region, where Egypt is concerned, it has been integrated in the peace process. What the focus nowadays is, from the Israeli point of view, is to co-opt Saudi Arabia. Once Saudi Arabia comes in and normalizes relations, the Israelis are convinced that we don't have to bother about any other issue. Palestinians can be hammered from time to time, but as far as we are concerned, we would have been accepted by the world's major Arab and Islamic countries. So this is now, when it comes to Iran versus Saudi Arabia, it was Saudi Arabia's vulnerability. Saudi Arabia felt vulnerable in front of this major country and turned to the Americans for strategic support, realized through the last decade that this is not forthcoming, and decided to opt for diplomatic overtures and diplomatic engagement with the Iranians. Today, I would say to you, the region is in flux, just like the rest of the world is in flux, but certainly West Asia is in flux. You have the decline of US influence and authority. You have the emergence of China and Russia as credible players. You have a Saudi-Iran engagement. You have Turkey looking at all these major countries in the region and seeing how it can shape its own foreign policy. In this scenario, United States does not figure. You find more and more in terms of strategic autonomy, these countries are looking to balance their ties with the US with their relations with Russia and China. So you are seeing a scenario. Now, does this mean that we are looking at a new world order? My answer is yes. We are looking at a new world order. The world order that was West dominated and under American hegemony, I think, is in serious decline. It is not, Americans want to say to us that the old Cold War is being replaced by a new binary divide with with the United States confronting China and Russia. I don't believe that rest of the international community is comfortable with this binary. What we are looking at is asserting strategic autonomy as part of a broader multipolar world order. Now, this is the big picture, the very big picture. And I believe all these things that are happening are part of that very big picture. Where does you have a right to ask me, where does India fit into this? My answer to you is, as that is again, I had earlier mentioned that I am speaking more with sorrow than anger. I'm going to speak once again with sorrow than anger. India appears to me, India appears to have opted out from all these interesting discussions, engagements, partnerships, competition, cooperation, etc. It appears to me that we have left the space, the geopolitical space, which is crucial for our interest. To my mind, is Eurasia and the Indian Ocean. In the Indian Ocean, with the help of our Navy, we are asserting our place and presence, but I don't think there is a threat from China in the Indian Ocean. The threat is to the Americans in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. That's a very different scenario. Where we are concerned, I have argued in an article in the latest Frontline, I have pointed out that in the Indian Ocean, Chinese and Indian interests are congruent. They have exactly the same interest as us, but I will leave that out for the time. Where I'm looking with great concern with Eurasia. I have seen China and Russia separately and jointly expanding their presence all across Central Asia, all across West Asia, and slowly penetrating South Asia as well. And there is, therefore, I want to see a change in this. I'll tell you what I want a vision. I want our country to have a vision. I want some people to get together, including yourselves. Get together, give yourself a project. What do I want India to look like 10 years later? I don't want slogans. Oh, Vishwa Guru, and we are the greatest people, or humne sab kuch seekh liya. We had planes when others were monkeys. All don't give that nonsense. We have to cross this sloganeering and rubbish. Become serious people. Where do you want India to? That is the vision. Then you have strategy. Strategy to realize that vision. The strategy is, what are the resources? Financial, technological, human. Who are your partners? And then you have an action plan for every 2 years. Change the action plan. I want that. What we are looking at is extraordinary focus on sloganeering and breast beating. A country, see, keep quiet. Don't say much. I have seen the Chinese at work. They don't announce anything till it is already half achieved. Then they go ahead and they do what they have to do. So I want us to be present at every high table. I want us to be influential role players. I see a new world order emerging right in front of our eyes. I want us to be there. Please also remember that an affiliation with the United States is not a shortcut, because in these large competitions of a global dimension, there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. No, Americans are not going to say, I love you and you come and sit in my lap and I'll take you places. I'll show you Hawaii and El Dorado and Florida and whatever. No, we cannot be. We are too large a country. What is our strategic culture? A strategic culture, a country that celebrates Ramayana and Mahabharata and the Vedas and Arthashastra. We cannot be somebody else's servant supporting their strategic interests. I want us to define our own strategy. And I want us to, these young people should put their mind. You are all the time telling me in your various messages, you're a group of young people. The next 30 years is yours. All the people hanging around you and misguiding you and giving you slogans will not be there after 5 years. But you will still be picking up the pieces. So please ensure, quietly, seriously, put your minds together and build a plan. there is a term that is used very loosely and very few Indians know what it means, strategic culture. And we are told, अरे strategic culture हमारा तो बहुत पुराना है, वो हमारा वेदा से निकला और वो रामायण और महाभारत और अर्थशास्त्र और उपनिषद से बन गया. We don't need. I said at a meeting, and I'm going to share that with you. Strategic culture is the lived experience of a people over the previous 2000 years. These texts, which are our heritage and which are cherished by us, end the narrative, begin the heritage. And you have to come to this day. What all happened? 800 years of encounter with Muslims, which brought their own culture, their own way of thinking, and they lived with us and were with us for 800 years and built a certain culture. Then you had the British who introduced us to modernism. Then you had the freedom struggle. And in the 19th century in India, you had a very robust debate of what will India be. This debate was finalized in the Constitution of India. And then you have 75 years of freedom. All of these we have to draw upon to understand what is our strategic culture. It is a very rich culture, but it is not a limiting culture. It is a rich culture because it has produced us. It has enabled me to have a career in diplomacy and to talk to people like yourself 12 years after my retirement. We have things to say to each other, but ultimately the responsibility is yours. So think this through. Strategic culture, don't get taken in by crap. Don't have to shout from the rooftop. Don't have to get unnecessary attention upon yourself. But think, what is the salvation of my country? Where will I fit in? What can I contribute? Who are my friends? Who I should put together? ये नहीं कि भाई एक some statement is made in some stupid place and we go running and we do something. That is not foreign policy. Foreign policy is a product of the mind. It is not true. Very seriously, it doesn't involve posturing. It does not involve sloganeering. It involves a serious application of the mind and to reflect on matters of a long-term value.
Sir, that was a wonderful answer. It was a really insightful description. We also focus on in building Indian School of International Relations. As you said, the Chinese bridged that gap. That bridging was possible because they formulated international relations from their own perspective, not just being subservient to the Western theories and traditions. We are also focused on Indian School of IR, and under your guidance, I think we are committed enough, and I reassure you that we can work a lot in this field. I think I will give the platform to Khushi. She has a question.
Good evening, sir. My question to you is: how has the West Asian conflict evolved during your tenure as the Indian ambassador, and what key changes have you observed?
The principal issue that we have had, starting from everything, you have to go back to 1979. The 1979 is a watershed because certain developments took place and certain decisions were taken whose ramifications are with us.
Three.
Huh?
In your
Yeah.
book, you mentioned three
Three.
events.
There are three events: Iranian Revolution, the occupation of Haram Sharif,
Yes.
and the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. The Saudis combated the Islamic Revolution by encouraging Saddam Hussein to invade. An 8-year war began. Saddam Hussein then demanded a reward for his fight and he occupied Kuwait. The Americans came there and have not left since then. Second is the Saudis had the Haram Sharif occupied. Their standing in the Islamic world and the Arab world was questioned. They needed a very major Islamic cause to support, and they got it when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. So you had the Saudis converted, with the help of the Americans and the Pakistanis, an Afghan national struggle against occupation into a global jihad. Therefore, you find injected into West Asian politics two conflicts. The conflict involving the Americans seeking to liberate Kuwait, but then ensuring that they stay on. And they they emasculated Iraq. That is what the Israelis wanted, don't forget. And the Israelis wanted the emasculation of Iran, which is why they put the dual containment and the no-fly zones. But they forgot that they had started this other monster, jihad. We had never had a jihad in the last century in West Asia, except the last time in 1914 when the Ottoman Khalif, Ottoman ruler Sultan, declared a jihad. They had come back, and the Americans don't know that this jihad was sponsored by them. And as they took their eyes off the jihad of Afghanistan, the jihadis attacked the United States. Therefore, when I arrived in Saudi Arabia, within 1 year, I had to face the consequences of the jihad, Al-Qaeda. It had a destabilizing impact all across the region on the one hand, and you had the implications of the Iraq struggle. They came together because Afghanistan is attacked in 2001 and Iraq is attacked in 2003. So the region now becomes very unstable. Why? Because once you have taken away the source of stability in Iraq and the source of stability in Afghanistan, what do you have? When a country is broken, you find the rise of extremist elements. You see the return of Taliban in Afghanistan, and you see the emergence of jihad in Iraq. So these were the issues in the first decade. The first decade of instability saw the emergence not just of Al-Qaeda revamping itself and decentralizing, but you see the emergence of the Islamic State of Iraq, which in 2012 becomes the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. Therefore, the second decade, I have retired by that time, becomes the period of the attack on the Islamic State. Only thing I will strike a personal note because you asked me, what did I do during that first decade? I never left the region by choice. I'm a very rare specialist in my foreign service. As I saw the towers of 9/11 coming down, I took a personal decision not to leave the region. The government sent me any place, small places, it didn't matter. I did not have a normal career, but I had a career on my terms. I went to a small place like Oman after Saudi Arabia. I did not get Iran, I did not get Egypt, I did not get anything that was worthy of my decision. But I said, doesn't matter. I'm a student. I am accredited to West Asia. I'm not accredited to one country. I stayed there. And that is what I did in that time. And I started writing books. Whatever I had learned, I wanted to share. Therefore, my first book, Reform in the Arab World, came out in 2005. And then responding to the violence, Children of Abraham at War. Then after retirement, I saw the Arab Spring developments, and I wrote my third book, in 2014, Islamic Challenge in West Asia. So this is, but what was my personal thing? Because I didn't leave the region, I was able to see the trends insofar as ties with India were concerned. Through the Cold War, as far as Gulf countries were concerned, India was on the opposite side. It was Pakistan that was close to these countries. They first opened, after the Cold War, they opened engagement with us. And Jaswant Singh Ji went to Riyadh. I was ambassador there. We cleared the table. All the past of Pakistan, Kashmir, etc. was done. And Saudis said, we value our relations with you. In 2006, King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, Saudi ruler, in 2008, I identified because I was in Abu Dhabi during that time. This is the value of specialization. I saw the impact of the attack on Mumbai on the region at first hand. The region was terrified, traumatized. Why? They were vulnerable. If these Pakistanis could attack Mumbai and create such murder and mayhem, What about them? They were next door. They don't even have a navy. They have long coastlines, totally unguarded. I saw the reaction of UAE to me. The National Security Advisor wanted a briefing. The Interior Ministry took a briefing from me. I made a PowerPoint presentation on jihad. I was explaining jihad to them. Luckily, I'm a student of jihad, so I had a lot to say to them. And I told them, I said how jihad has come from Pakistan. And I saw that they were interested in a new relationship with us. I was sent to Saudi Arabia the second time for Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit. I told the Prime Minister's office that they are ready for a strategic partnership with India. I could say this with confidence. I wrote a paper and he was shocked because everybody from MEA and other agencies and all told him कि वो तो हमारे दुश्मन, वो तो pro-Pakistan. So मैंने 7-10 साल तो झक नहीं मारी. I knew what has happened. I knew how things have changed. I wrote my approach paper to the visit towards a strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia. That is the title of my note. It went to I called my PA. I said ये 1000 dirham लो, एक फ्लाइट पकड़ो और सीधे इंडिया जाओ और ये मेरे नोट PMO में और MEA में बांट दो, बिकॉज बैग में भेजूंगा तो 10 दिन निकल जाएंगे. I said that. PM was shocked. He said ये क्या हो रहा है? I have not heard this. So he asked for it to be investigated whether I'm right. Lekin in the meantime, within 3 weeks he arrived. And as he arrived and I sat with him along with the ministers and all the other senior officers, he asked me, Ambassador, tell me, why have I come to this country? I said, sir, I was ambushed. I said, sir, you have come to establish a strategic partnership with Saudi Arabia. I spoke for 10 minutes. Then he turned to all the ministers and they said, we agree with the ambassador. He turned to the National Security Advisor who had come a little earlier. And he said, I have met my counterpart in this country and he has said the same thing that the ambassador has said. And we signed the Riyadh Declaration. So I am saying to you, this is, you could say, the personal contribution of an ambassador who doesn't leave the region and who therefore is able to watch the important developments that are taking place and the changes that are taking place. And the Mumbai attacks, because I was there, I saw the impact of the Mumbai attack. Because they felt that if India can be attacked, till then they were told by Pakistan, it was some Kashmir issue. And I used to say, this is not the Kashmir issue. Kashmir issue, though you can talk. This is jihad. And nobody is safe from jihad. And jihad is sponsored from Pakistan by state or enterprise. It's part of the state order. It's an instrument of state order. So, नहीं मानते थे हमारी बात. Mumbai से देखिए, it was covered on television for 4 days. They saw with their own eyes that the ambassador अब तक तो ठीक बात बोल रहा है. आओ, हमसे बात करो. हमको समझाओ क्या हुआ. UAE, we sent an UAE team to study what happened in Mumbai at first hand. जैसे ही we were able to arrest and kill all those terrorists, we sent a UAE team. वो ताज से ऊपर तक गए. But Taj Hotel is very important for our Gulf people. It's more than 100 years old. They have been staying there. The children have run across in the corridors. उसको वहां पे उन्होंने देखा, यहाँ तो आग लग गई. People died in that. The UAE team walked from every floor down one by one. They walked everything. क्या हुआ? I got the idea that now I can explain to them. Now they are where I want them. I'm telling you crudely that this is now they have understood what we are about. And that is how I was able to counter this rubbish from Pakistan once and for all. And that we have not changed. Just once Hamare PM, they signed the Riyadh Declaration. What is the subtitle of the Riyadh Declaration? A new era of strategic partnership. ऊपर लिखा है Riyadh Declaration, नीचे लिखा है a new era of strategic partnership. I asked the Saudi ambassador, did you steal my note? When I had written towards it, said, anyway, I don't mind. I said, you take all my files, but you give me this declaration. So this is what we happened. And then The PM, Mr. Modi, built on it. And we have done well. If I had remained in service, I would have encouraged, is that don't stop here. Up to things are going well. Now we should go, assume responsibility. अगर हम इतने अमेरिका के खिलाफ हम बात कर रहे हैं कि दे डोंट अलाउ अस, दे डोंट अलाउ, हमारे ऊपर प्रेशर डालते हैं, ये करते हैं, अब आपके पास मौका आया है, अब आप इसको छोड़िए मत. वो initiative, the next leap forward, we avoided, and we gave the space to the Chinese.
Sir, when we were doing our homework with regards to this interview, we did realize how important your contributions were for the Riyadh Declaration and the following Delhi Declaration.
ऐसा personalize मत करिए. We are all part of a team.
We
are part of
went
a
through your journey.
You cannot do anything unless the team is with you.
Yes.
And it starts with the Prime Minister, and then people. They must also build credibility. You see, I'm a jaded vet. When I was leaving for Abu Dhabi, I went to meet Minister Pranabji, and he knew me. Well, I've been I said jaded. So I said, Talmiz, I have selected you personally to go to Abu Dhabi. You are not my ambassador in Abu Dhabi. You are my ambassador in the whole West Asia. I always tell people I write a lot.
And it's a treat to read your
write a lot in those days. And I used to joke with people. If you have heard it, please stop me. That I have a fundamental right to write. You have a fundamental right not to read. You can't stop me from writing, and I can't force you to read. So I used to write a lot. I used to enjoy it. I write. And that I have continued after it.
And we have read your books as well, sir. We move to Priyanshu. He has a good question on the Arab countries.
Good evening, sir. So my question to you is how the Arab countries stay relevant in front of their population that they are doing something for their for Palestine.
They're doing something for the
Palestinian cause.
Palestine.
How do they convince their
I'm going to study this subject. Many of my friends have asked me that we are disappointed with the Arab leaders not giving the Palestinians the full support we expect. You can. So I have said that for Frontline, I will write an article. In Frontline, I've just published an article yesterday or day before on India's maritime challenges. I have a very bad habit of writing long articles. So you have to be a real soldier to go through those articles. But I will write a substantial piece to explain to you what all has been happening. Let me not preempt. The people of West Asia, North Africa, the ordinary population, totally supports the Palestinian cause, identifies itself with Palestinian aspirations, and sees itself as part of an integral part of this Arab identity. The rulers are different. Rulers, by definition, have only self-interest. Each ruler, I'm not saying that he doesn't have a right or wrong. Each ruler takes decisions on the basis of what suits him at any time. Right? Certain rulers find it expedient to engage with Iran. Some rulers have a legitimate concern about Hamas. See, it is, for example, Hamas is an Islamic group. It is a group that comes from the Muslim Brotherhood, the greatest rival of the sheikhs of the Gulf, the rulers of the Gulf, is the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood has an alternative political vision, a vision that marries parliamentary democracy with Islamic values and argues that Islamic values and parliamentary democracy are compatible. This is troubling for our Gulf rulers who are concerned that their own people may find this ideology alluring. So many of them have certain concerns about Hamas. Because if Hamas wins, Hamas gains credibility, then you will find that the Gulf rulers will be concerned. Just as you had when the situation you had when Iranian revolution took place. Iran did not talk of a Shia revolution. They said this is an Islamic revolution. It is a revolution that upholds democratic principles, but it is a revolution that confronts the West. It is revolutionary. It will part of the resistance. And all these countries in the Gulf were part of the Western nexus. So there was a concern. Therefore, the Arab countries had to rubbish the Islamic revolution by saying it is not an Islamic revolution, but a Shia revolution. And then encourage Saddam Hussein to attack them so that the revolution is ended. You know the story, what happened? Saddam thought he would fight for 3 months. Even 8 years later, but he declared victory. The Iranians accepted a truce. The thing is, and then you know the consequences of that are still with us. Decisions that rulers take from time to time in their interest very often has unintended consequences. Very often you hear this word. I'm uncomfortable with unintended consequences. Very often the consequences were there, but you refuse to see them. You then later on say these were unintended consequences. Converting the Afghan national struggle into a jihad, and then to say, oh, I did not know that the jihad would become so resonant, so powerful. Is that an unintended consequence? It is obvious. Even somebody like me sitting in Jeddah knew that this is going to be a disaster for the region. I told people, I said, ये आप क्या कर रहे हैं अपने देश में? ये लोग जब वापस आएंगे, the first enemy will be their government. Exactly what happened with Osama bin Laden. So these Americans may call them unintended consequences. Not all consequences are unintended. We are able to predict many of them. I had predicted, for example, that the Americans will lose in Iraq, that there will be an insurrection. Later on, American sources said they were ill prepared for an insurrection. How can you say such a thing? With all your CIA and State Department and Defense Department, you could not predict that these Iraqi people will rise against your occupation of their country. They said we were ill prepared and they could not fight. And then, of course, you had jihad because you started privileging the Shia. So, the answer to your question is that there is a problem. The problem is it needs detailed study because the Palestinians are not one monolith. Their Palestinian aspirations are the same, but their political ethos is divided between the Fatah, the party of Yasser Arafat, and Hamas, which is an Islamic. So we have to see which way it will go. The Gulf countries are very uneasy with Hamas.
Hello, sir. My question is related to Operation Prosperity Guardian, right? So it was taken under the initiative of protecting freedom of navigation and trade in the Red Sea. But do you think it was a justified action given that the two people who undertook it were some of the farthest actors from the region?
I'm sorry, your question was not clear to me. If you don't mind, could you speak slowly and clearly, if you don't mind?
Yes, sir. Sorry. The Operation Prosperity Guardian was undertaken by the US and UK, right? So was it justified given the fact that the US and UK are some of the farthest actors from the Red Sea region?
Okay. You're saying the US and the UK were sources of regional security, right? In West
Yes,
Asia.
sir. Yes,
Did I
sir.
Operation
understand your
Prosperity
question?
Guardian, sir.
Huh?
Operation Prosperity Guardian
Huh.
that was launched against Houthis.
Okay, you're asking specifically about the Houthis.
Yes.
Yeah, you're asking about the Houthis. Uh, is this justified?
Operation Prosperity
Is this
Guardian.
is this coordination justified?
Y-
Well, don't bother about what happened when the Houthis are saying you stop the bombing of Gaza and allow humanitarian assistance. Until we do that, till you do that, we will continue to damage your shipping. Our Western friends have no interest and no capacity to do anything in Gaza. And what do they really know? They only know one thing, to go and bomb somebody. I don't know if I have said this many times. The default position of the Americans in response to any serious issue is to go and bomb that problem, hoping that somehow it will disappear. Do you know that everything that they have done has made the situation worse? No issue has ever been settled. I always, my audience, when I speak at a conference, you've always heard the word American military forces. How come you never hear the word American diplomacy? Use their diplomacy. They're good diplomats, but you never hear of that. You hear only military force, military force. So yes, what did they do? They say global shipping is being disturbed. We can't do anything about Gaza. Let us go and attack the Houthis. So they said we took out, within the first few days, they said we took out 30% of their firepower. This was said in November, early December. We are in March, and the Houthis have already sunk an American, British ship. So unless you address the sources of problems, bombing countries and bombing people and killing 10 people here and 20 people there doesn't solve anything. We have found now non-state actors have extraordinary fighting capacity. You have seen the Houthis. The fight began in 2015, ninth year, in March this year. 9 years would have been completed of the fighting. We thought they were a ragtag group, and the Saudi armed forces, they've been funded by the Americans for the last 60 years. They held their own. The Iranians are a much later participant in this. The Houthis are fully capable of looking after themselves. Yes, it is true that the drones and the missile capacities have come from Iran. I'm sure about that. But the Houthis are the operational force, and they are pretty effective. So I would say to you a very simple thing. Yes, the British and the Americans have become upholders of freedom of shipping, particularly through the Red Sea, their own direct commercial interest. All the movement of Asian goods towards Europe and America go through the Red Sea. Obviously, they have a direct interest in keeping the shipping lines open. But this is the group that you have ignored for so long, and they have certain demands upon you. Fulfill those demands, you will find peace and plenty in your region. So I would say that this is where we are. I see near total absence of serious capacity on the part of Western powers. They are today. I really wish this was a time when we were players, serious players, not sloganeers. This is because the West is in decline. I'm telling you very honestly, as a serious student of history, I personally believe the West is in decline. I'm not saying that they have lost their economic capacity and their military capacity. They have lost their intellectual capacity. The kind of capacities that gave them strategic vision. Where in India, a district collector knew what the Queen wanted and how he upheld British imperial interests. Each of them was a part of that major enterprise. वो अब नहीं है इन लोगों के. This is where we should be scoring with our strength of our mind. Yes, our legacy is so rich. We should use that legacy, but don't stop at 2,500 years ago. Build on that. Now the Germans have come. Germans are roaming around. I don't even know if they have a navy. वो कहते हैं उनका 2 जहाज है. वो जहाज लेके यहाँ पहुंच गए. French are here. They are these Chinese, British, of course, are here. The Americans are here. I told them in a very major conference like this, I said, may I request my European friends to keep their navy in Europe? You have enough issues over there. Please look after those issues rather than disturb us in our own territory. We are fully capable of looking after our interest here. I don't see you playing any positive role or constructive role. I mean, I laughed. I told the German, I said, I didn't even know you guys had a navy. No, those days are gone, the First World War and Second World War. Please remain in Europe. You don't have enough issues. You have the Ukraine war. Please go and deal with that. Please don't bother us over here because you have nothing useful to do.
Sir, the fact that the Western diplomacy has failed to even bring a truce in Gaza war or even stop border skirmishes or daily firing through between Israel and Lebanon, it shows that they don't have diplomatic credibility left in the region, and their deterrence of aircraft carriers and fighter jets have also failed. The last question. This is the last question. I wish I had 24 more hours with you, but this is the last question, sir. All of us here are wannabe foreign service aspirants. So, just to conclude, your life experience for us, uh, if we want to pursue Indian foreign policy. Just final remarks from your side.
The best career in India is the Indian Foreign Service. There is no service that compares. Every one of you is valued from the time you join. Every one of you has the capacity to contribute. All of you are individually respected. I would say to you, don't get involved with these IAS and police because they have become thoroughly corrupt and instruments of state power and state violence. Our service is still a service of dignity and cerebral challenge. The difference, I said the police has the danda in his hand and he can break your head and your legs. The IAS can do diabolical things to you because he exercises power and influence. We are the only service that use our brains. You are selected because you have intellectual capacity. I would say to you that even in the present difficult time, the service is holding itself well. And every one of you has an opportunity. Okay, not everyone becomes a foreign secretary and minister, but wherever you are, you have a right to make a contribution. The main thing you should worry about now, and I have a very practical approach, you must first pass the exam. First pass the exam, उसके बाद आप मुझसे बात करें. The career is, I have already told you in 2-3 sentences. The exam is, you must put in the form IFS as your first choice. Not your second choice, not your third choice, not your fourth choice. Put it as your first choice. The chances of selection are therefore much higher. We are selecting 35 to 40 people per year. 50% in the general list, then 25, say 40, 25% in the OBC and 25% in the large SC/ST category. Right? There's a chance for everybody to come in. That's your first choice. But first focus on the exam. I don't want that lottery system. You see, many of young people, which disturbs me. यार किसी तरह ये main exam, ये preliminary exam खत्म कर दे, उसके बाद पढ़ाई कर. No. Take the exam seriously. Finish your academic studies first. Get a good degree, a good master's degree, any subject. Get a good master's. Don't study for the IAS during that. After that, give yourself 1 year. 1 year to study for the IAS. Keep reading because you cannot teach yourself reading. Don't ever use the word, I will crack the exam. This is not an exam that you can crack. Many people will tell you a lot of useless things and rubbish. It is a test of your mind, of your knowledge, of your intellect, and of your personality. 3 parts. 3 parts. Focus on all of that. Keep article, read a lot. Read a lot and keep systematic approach, like certain topics, Indian economy, one folder, Indian political, one folder, Indian elections, one folder. In this way, keep from now till 2 years later, not too many. I mean, you don't want to keep these folders, Indian armed forces, China issue, Pakistan issue, all that. Keep these topics separately. We will come across articles. I mentioned Hindu, Indian Express, Frontline. Keep on looking at these articles and keep on keeping them with you. And do the general studies paper well and take the international studies and political science paper. The rest I don't know because the exam, I did the exam many years ago. I don't know the details of the present exam. But there is no harm in taking coaching. But coaching should not be a substitute for your own preparation. Coaching should supplement your studies. Sometimes they give you a little pointer here and a pointer there. कोई essay, हमारे जमाने में essay होता था. English language essay. It was a compulsory paper
आज
because
भी है सर.
paper was in English. General English का एक पेपर होता था. Essay का एक पेपर होता था. और general knowledge का एक होता था. Okay? The English. We got help with writing an essay. Got help with writing an English paper. Other things are all on your own. You study on your own. And take a little help. After you have cleared the written and you are preparing for the interview, they don't call it interview, it's called personality test. Remember, it's not an interview because your knowledge and your intellect have already been tested. You're now testing your personality. ये किस तरह का शख्स है हमारे सामने बैठा है. And only 25 to 30 minutes they will judge you. Don't have to be nervous. Don't have to be what you are not. Answer what you know and tell them that this topic I am not fully familiar with, and don't have to be obsequious or self-confident. You are going to become an officer. The day you join, 3/4 of government of India will be under you.
Yes.
Don't you are a leader in the upper echelons, and you are going to lead the country's interest in your time. Okay, so focus on the exam rather than service. So I have already told you, and I don't want to elaborate and waste your time. There will be other occasions. You can put one conversation with me on foreign service.
Sure, sir.
What it is like, how long, I can talk to you about foreign service. But you should talk about foreign service when you are getting in, not when it is a remote dream. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Shall we call it a day then?
Yes, sir. You have just told me the report that we have compiled based on your book, West Asia at War. We have studied the entire region based on your book, sir. If we can just present it. Is it visible to you, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So this is made by the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies, and we will be releasing this report in this month. The index has all the countries that are affected by the conflict. This is an executive summary. And as part of our gratitude towards you, sir, and your invaluable experience, we decided to build a report for this interview and get it released to the audience in your presence, sir. And we analyzed all the countries with cartography and infographics.
I must compliment you. This looks very, very attractive.
So I will be mailing this to
Very
you.
attractive.
This is a comprehensive study.
A good, useful contribution to the discussion. And I think you have all made a very major effort to produce a quality paper.
Yes. We'll be mailing it to you, sir.
Very good. Well done.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Jai Hind, sir.
All right. All the best to you.